All right, today we're going to take a look at a program called Aperty. It is a portrait software program. This is only for doing portrait retouching, so it is not a general purpose kind of tool. It'll work as a standalone application. It'll also work as a plugin with Lightroom and Photoshop. And I think it does a pretty good job at what it does. There are some things that it doesn't do, which I kind of wish it did, but I understand that's not its role. And we'll go over those during the course of this video. But this is from Skylum, the same folks who brought you Luminar Neo. And you may be wondering, well, if I've got Luminar Neo, do I need Aperty? And I can see where it could go either way. There are some tools inside of Aperty that are not inside of Luminar Neo, and vice versa. There are certainly tools in Luminar Neo that are for general purpose photography that you're not going to find in this. It is a specialized portrait editing tool. So if you keep that in mind, you may not have to worry about what isn't in the tool because it wasn't designed to be a do-all, everything kind of photo processing tool. So with that, let's take a look. So first I'm going to start off on the Skylum webpage, and you can see it over here. Now, I'm not entirely certain about how they're pronouncing it. I'm saying Aperty. I've heard other people call it Aperty, which, you know, since I was born in the South, it kind of reminds me of someone who says, well, ain't that a pretty photo? Whatever it is, this is the name of the tool. And it is covering, I think, all the bases that you want for portrait retouching, not photo retouching. So let's make sure that's a clear distinction between the two. Portrait retouching, which means that you're probably going to want or possibly need another photo editing tool to handle some things for the global photo that are not handled by the portrait retouching software here. So you can see that it's got a typical standard interface where you'll get a view of what your photo is. The toolbar will be over here on the side, as you can see that. And I kind of want to show you, there's a free trial up here. I've got a link in the description below. If you go to williambeam.com/Aperty, that'll take you right here. And you can take a look at the plans. There's a couple of different ways you can look at it. So if you want to do it monthly, maybe you don't need this all the time, $19.95 per month. Annually, it costs you less, so it's billed at $199 annually. There is a perpetual license with 1 year of updates for $399. That's basically buy it once, you get updates for a year, and it will continue to run at least until your software no longer works with your operating system. After this 1 year, this 1 year of updates, well, if they come out with a new feature, you won't get that included after your updates are over with. So think about that if you're going to go for the perpetual license. Some people don't like having to renew every year, and the perpetual license eliminates that, but it also means that you may not get new features, 2-3 years down the road. There is also a tool for teams, and that's something where you'd have to contact sales in order to get details on what the pricing is for that. So they've got a few things over here as far as why you may want to use this tool. And retouching automation, this is an AI tool. I understand that the masking that they use, or at least the face detection, has about 4,000 dots. In other words, it's making a very detailed map of a person's face in order to do the retouching that they need to do. It works offline, so you don't have to have an internet connection to go do something on the cloud. This is happening on your computer. So if you're working on an airplane someplace, you should be fine. You can do batch editing. I like the fact that we're looking at natural looking results. Time-saving technology, that's true. I mean, if you compare this to doing things manually in Photoshop, it's going to take you less time to do things here in this tool. If you compare this with other tools, for example, Luminar Neo, On1's Photo Raw, then I don't know if you're saving that much time. But compared to traditional editors, which I would say Photoshop and Lightroom are in that batch, then it's going to save you some time. And as far as plugin support, you can get this, as I mentioned, as a plugin for either Photoshop or for Lightroom. All right, let me go ahead and skip down and show you the requirements for the computer. All right, so this works on Mac OS and Windows, and you can see that what it requires. And it's saying early 2010 or newer. That actually goes back quite a ways. And they're saying CPU Intel Core i5 or better. So that's also going back. 8 gigs of RAM is basic, 16 or more is better. I am running on an M1 iMac with 16 gigs of RAM. It's pretty fluid. There are a couple of things where it's pausing to wait to update the display. So I would say that the better system you have, as with all of these tools, the faster it's going to go. You can see the same requirements over here, more or less, for what it takes on a Windows machine. And it's going to tell you as far as hard disk space, SSD for best performance, and so forth, and what the display sizes are and what kind of graphics you need for Windows. All right, why don't we go ahead and take a look inside of the tool itself. All right, so this is what the user interface looks inside. This is one of my photos. It's a Nikon RAW file. You can tell there are some sensor dust spots over here. And this is a friend of mine, and we just did a nice little photo shoot with her and some of her friends one time. And the background is a white background, but it's looking gray because there is some fall off from the light. So I wanted to point those things out as we go through a few of the features and items inside of here. So let's go first. I'm going to start down at the bottom. And so you can see your photo name in NEF as a Nikon RAW file. You can mark this as a favorite. You can change your percentage to fit to screen. This one is your split screen, so it's going to show you your before and after view. If I can grab it. So we haven't done anything here, so that's not really doing anything. This button is your kind of before and after preview. So if you want to turn this off and just click on this little eyeball, that'll show you what your before looked like when you hold it down, and then you'll see what you're working on as you do something. So over here, you can see show film strip, and that's right down here. I've only got the one photo loaded, so I'm going to leave that alone. And then you can sort your images. Not a big deal. Keep in mind, this is not a photo management tool. So there's a catalog in Luminar Neo, and that's a rudimentary one. This one is not here to basically sort and manage your photos. It's not Lightroom by any stretch of the imagination. They do have projects. You can have multiple photos in the project. You can do batch editing with this tool, but this is not going to be handling your photo management. It is, as I said, a portrait retouching tool. So over here, we can see we've got, the usual suspects about Aperty, check for updates, install plugins, and so forth. This will let you know where you can go if you want to create a project. And one of the things I noticed that I think bothers me a little bit is once I've clicked on that, there's no easy way in the user interface to get out of the project view and get back to the view that you want. So I'm going to click on this, and that takes me back here. I don't know if that's the way they intended it to work, but that's as best I found. There was no return to this view. So you can add images here, you can erase and clone, and you can dodge and burn. So erase and clone is probably, let's see if I've got that. Choose your size over here. So let's say for these dust spots, I just want to tap and get rid of those. And I may have missed a few of them in there, but so you can do that. I'd say that it works as well as probably anything else. Now, if you want to get into detail, you can see that she's got some fine hairs over here that are going on. Let's see if my bracket keys are changing the size of this, and I may want to zoom in a little bit. I'm holding down my command key and the plus key to get in closer. And let's see what happens. Make that just to try and see what happens. So if you want to get rid of some hair, then you can do that. Now, I'm using a mouse right now. I'd probably rather do this with a pen, but that's just, your preference and whatever tools you have. All right, so I'm going to hit Command 0, and that'll bring me back to my full-size image. So there's erase by default, and then you've got cloned. You can choose the size, as I said, either using the slider or by using the plus or minus keys. And then you've got this option over here, remove after each stroke. I suspect if that's off, you can select a lot of things and then go ahead and click the erase button. But I kind of like the idea of doing it here. So that is just a quick way to get rid of dust spots and maybe some stray hairs, things that you want to do that might take a little bit of time to go through. I'm not going to give this a detailed work through or workflow. I'm just going to show you what the tools are. And then down here, I can save this and I'm done with that part. So if you look over here there's a couple of things. There's this side of tool icons, and then there is this part, which show the panels that we're talking about. You can tell what you're on. It is slightly brighter here where it says Essentials. But let's start at the top. There are some presets. Now you can mark your own presets. You can mark some favorite presets. There are presets for color, creative, retouching, and external. I don't have anything for external, obviously. And you'll see some here by Julia Trotti. She is the photographer who worked with Skylum to come up with this tool. So she's got some of her own presets in here. And here's one called Sunlit Glow. And you can see that just kind of changes things. It's changed the background. It's changed her. And it changed her skin texture. So if we come back down to the eyeball that I talked about, you can see that is our before and after. And that before takes you all the way back. You can see the dust spots are still showing up. So it's not like you're just seeing what happened at the point where we selected that preset. You're seeing the image that you had at the very beginning. So the dust spots are gone and it's got her effects over it. If you don't want anything over here, then you can just click this little circular arrow to undo that. Now that got rid of the presets because that was the preset undo. We still do not have any problems with undoing everything. So the little hair that I erased off of there, the dust spots, those are still gone. So be careful when you see these undo things and make certain if it's for just the step that you did or if it's going to be a global undo. All right, so that preset pretty much handles this. Now you can create your own preset, give it a name, and save it. What I did was I clicked up here for this little icon to create a preset. Now that's going to take whatever settings that you've made inside of the tool, and that will be your preset. So you can quickly, easily save it just like that. All right, so I'm done with the presets. Let's go over here to our next step down, masking. And you can see where there is mask person or plural persons, or the mask the background. So if we mask our person, let's say first one, and you can see it's thinking right there. And you can just click it again to get another person. We don't have person 2 on this one, so I'm going to subtract that, or delete this, I should say. So now that we've got this mask, I'm really not certain about the masking here. And that's because I'm seeing red over everything. I would expect that if I'm going to mask a person, it would have selected her and only have a mask on her. If I'm going to do something mask on a background, let's try that and highlight it, I would expect only to have the background masked. So this is not working the way I would normally think it should work. And I don't know if that's because I'm doing something wrong or if the tool is needing a little bit of help. Now you can add or subtract to your mask using a number of tools. So you can use the brush, linear gradient or radial gradient. Then they also show the persons or background. So let's say I'm on the background. I want to subtract the persons. Let's see what I get. Nothing. Okay, so either I'm doing something blatantly wrong or this just isn't working. I'll let you guys decide that for yourself. So with that, I'm going to take and get rid of these masks. And that is, like I said, using the mask persons or the mask background. That doesn't mean that we're going to have a problem, creating a mask for something else. So if I go ahead and say mask persons again, I can still come in here and add, subtract, invert. So if I want to subtract something, let's say with a brush, you can see that the red is going away as I brush over this. And then I will save that. And then you see the mask thumbnail up there. So this is why I'm a little frustrated, I think, with the masking. If I see something that says mask persons, I expect that the background, and this is a very clean background, is not going to be part of it. So that part, I either need to read the documentation or I need a better user interface. Something for my benefit just isn't working right there. All right, so let's get past masking. We can come back down. And of course, you've got your ability to crop. You can choose your aspect ratio. You can transpose things. And you can do a custom aspect. So you can do whatever you want freehand. You can rotate, flip, and all those other fun things. You can correct distortion in optics. And you can see that it just made a quick change there. So let's see if we can't find our eyeball. And I clicked on this one down here. That's for the essentials. And so you can see as I go in and out, there is our original, as you can tell by the dust spots. And then this is where we corrected for optics. So we'll go back up here for a moment for this. So we can correct for distortion, chromatic aberration, defringe, all these little things. If you got lens distortion as you want to try and correct for, you've got things over here. You can see how her body is changing based off of that. If you don't like what you've done, you want to reset it, just double click on the title of the tool that you're using for the slider. It'll reset it back to the default. And devignette, and you can choose your midpoint for the devignette if you're doing that. Well, I don't have a vignette on here. And then, of course, you can do your transform tools. So there's a lot of things here that you can do working with the canvas. And again, those are all good tools to have, things that I would expect in a photo editing tool, more than I would expect in a portrait editing tool. All right, so let's go to Essentials. This is where you're going to get basically your develop tools. So you can choose a camera profile. They've got their own default. They've got some Adobe things in here. And they've got some different camera stuff. You can put in your custom DCPs if you want to. So let's say if we did it from camera portrait, you can see how the color changes a little bit. I actually kind of like starting with the default. If you like what you're seeing with some of these different camera profiles as a starting point, then that's great. Go ahead and use it. But I'm going to leave this as the default. Your white balance, you can choose, again, as shot. You've got where you can change, daylight, cloudy. And this one is not changing as I go through it. So let's say if I change this to cloudy. All right, so now you can see the change. So for the white balance, if you want to do that, you can see it once you select it. There is an eyedropper over here. So if you want to get on a background and click that, and then that kind of helps because, again, that is a white background that's just showing as gray. So we got a nice little change there. I kind of like that. And of course, you can change your temperature. We can warm things up, we can cool things down, and double click the temperature label just to get it right back. Same thing with tint. On the light side, you've got your exposure, contrast, highlights, shadows, whites and blacks, all pretty typical things you would expect. You've got a curves over here that you can use either the global one or by the RGB colors. And then you've got colors, so you've got vibrance. Now, vibrance and saturation for portraits, vibrance is really designed for people, and I prefer to use vibrance rather than a saturation. If I want to go for a desaturated look, I kind of like bringing the vibrance all the way down, or I can pump up the colors like that. Let's double click this. Now, if I do my saturation, we can do this. Now, there is a black and white service in here. You don't have to just desaturate it to get that. And of course, if you bring the saturation all the way up, you've got some cartoonish colors. And remove color cast. This is one that I find is handy because you will find that there is a lot of color cast in every photo. There's going to be something with the lighting, something with the shading. I kind of like the fact that this is here because as I bring this up, this is more to my taste. This is more to what I saw at the time I was taking the photos. So I'm going to leave that alone. For colors, hue, saturation, and light, I'm not going to go over all of these because that's kind of a common thing, but you've got your options over there. Now, I did mention a conversion to black and white. So you've got an option here for conversion. So let's take that. There's our conversion. And then you can work with luminance and saturation to see, let's say if we take our reds, which her top, if you remember, let's show you back, had some reds in it. So you can look at the lining on where her sleeves would go on the neckline. So that's kind of a pink more than a red, but you can see how we're changing that. And also it's affecting our skin tone. As far as a little bit of yellow, that's also affecting our skin tone. So you've got these things. With the green, if you look at her earring on her right ear, you can see how that's changing a little bit. So it's nice to have these changes with illumination or the luminance. And then we'll go for saturation. I can go for the red. And you can see how that's really pulling that back up. And for a black and white photo, I don't really want to have too much of that coming back in. So when I did my convert to black and white, that's what I've got. As I start working with these items over here, the luminance is what's helping me with my black and white. As soon as I clicked over on saturation, that's when I started bringing the color back. So let's go ahead and reset all of that. All right, so we've got our sharpening. We can go ahead and bring this up a little bit. And then once you've got your sharpening amount set, then you can determine the radius that you want, and preserve textures is a nice little feature as well here too. I'm not doing deep dives into the tools themselves. We may do that in future videos. I kind of want to show you what's in here. Details, you can talk about the small details, medium details, and large details as far as what kind of sharpening or texture you want there. And then structure, a lot of us like structure, so I'm going to bring this up. And as I do, where I'm seeing the difference is in her hair, the texture on her dress, and I kind of like having that as a little bit of detail. That might be a little bit more than I want. And then, of course, you can boost that if you want. And if I boost this all the way up, you can see it gets harsh. You can see her skin really becomes unflattering. So use these with small moves, kind of like flying an airplane. You don't want to make a big jerk to the left or the right. You just want to do small moves, evaluate. The only time I will do a big move, like, all the way over there for the amount and all the way over for this, is if I want to see if the tool is working or not. And another advantage of this is it really shows me where are the dust spots that I missed. So it's horrible for the portrait, but it's great for finding your dust spots. So if you want a little trick to find your dust spots, there it was, the erase and clone them. So used to having tools over on this side. So I've got this over here now. This button over here is my erase and clone. And if I want to find some of these dust spots and get rid of them, I can do that. And one by one, they start disappearing. So if you're not sure about your dust spots, then before you go into Erase and Clone, come over to Essentials, go all the way down to the bottom, and bring Structure and Boost all the way up. You'll find your dust spots. Now, I'm going to bring these down because that is not good for portraits, but it's good for dust spots. You've also got some noise reduction over here. We'll get to that in perhaps another video. I'm kind of showing you what's here. All right, so those are the basics, or the essentials as they talk about. For your retouching, you'll see that they've got some things over here for people, and it starts off with all. You can do an individual. They've got female, male, a teen, a child, elderly. So I'm going to click on female. Some of the tools are only going to work for all or individual. So for example, down here, I don't have anything with this until maybe I move this up. So that's for skin blemishes. She doesn't really have blemishes, so this is not a good photo for a demonstration of blemishes. But if you see that something is grayed out, it could be that you need to add a bit of the primary tool before that's going to be in place. Now, if you have freckles to remove, again, she does not. We can do our skin smoothing. Now, the skin smoothing is working, I think, really very well. She doesn't need it because we had a professional makeup artist. She's got really great skin. So when you put those things together and some good lighting, you're kind of off to a start with good skin. But a little bit of skin smoothing, I would say, is helpful. You don't want to lose the pores. And this one doesn't. It gives you still a realistic look. And then you can kind of click your details to see how much of the detail you want to show or bring up or not. Now we have a face skin color correction. This is kind of a tool I haven't seen in most others. So if you want to remove dark circles in her eyes, again, we don't have that problem here. If you want to brighten her face, it does brighten it. You can see it. And again, it'll let you get too far. And that's too far for this photo. If someone else is in shadow, you may want to have the power to brighten the face that much. The skin color correction, I don't see that we have any problems with the skin color here, so I would kind of back up to that. Shine removal is a problem every once in a while. You can see I've got some shine on her nose, on her cheek, right here above her eyebrow. So let's see what happens. Bring that up to about midpoint. And it's reducing the shine a bit. If I bring it all the way up, you don't really see the shine there anymore. Obviously, we still have the shine on her nose because there's only so much the software can do. But if I bring this all the way down, you'll see the shine come back over here and over here. So it is kind of a muted tool. And I think that's good. You don't, sometimes when you have like this much shine, you may have lost some of the pixels in there of what she actually looks like because the flash or your light source has already taken it out. All right, so for the eyes, you've got options over here, and I've tried this and I haven't really noticed. I don't know if this is for selecting someone who has blue eyes or if it's supposed to convert them to blue eyes, but I can tell you, you can see that it's detecting her iris. I don't see it converting to blue eyes. So I don't believe that's the purpose. Her eyes are pretty much brown, so we've kind of selected those. And now we can come up with a little bit of iris flare. If we had any redness, we could get rid of that. You could do a little bit of eye whitening. Or you could just really cheat and come down here to eye enhancement. And you can see the whites of her eyes picking up. I'm going to take this back to original iris and show you the eye enhancement and how that's really changing her eyes. All right, so the mouth, teeth whitening is not really going to work for us here. Neither is the brightening because she's not smiling with her teeth. So I'll leave that for another photo. Now this one for makeup, this is a place where, again, you don't see this in a lot of tools. This is great for a portrait retouching software. What do you want to do? Do you want to change the tone? And as I'm sliding this back and forth, you're not seeing a whole lot of change there. I'm going to put the amount way up to try and exaggerate so you do see some of the things. And what this is doing is putting blush on the cheeks or perhaps cheeks and nose. So over here where you see there is some blush now on her cheeks, and I've really brought this way up. So we can change the width, and you can see how that width changed. And if I take it way down, we can also change the height. And then that's kind of coming over here where I wouldn't expect it to be. But again, I've got the amount and the tone all the way up. So that's why I'm trying to be a little bit more careful about what I do here. And then you've got your X and Y, which, as you can see, that is deepening the tone here. And we're starting to see some of it show up on her forehead and on her nose. And I would suggest playing around with these tools to get the look that you want. And then back off. So, for example, for her cheeks, her tone, I kind of like it where it is there. Now, I can undo all of this. And what you're seeing now is the makeup that she had applied. Oh, excuse me. Let me just undo that. And revert to original. I wonder if that's going to take me all the way back. Let's find out. Yes, it does. So I didn't want to do that. So let's go back to, I've got all my dust spots back. So that's what I meant to be careful about this. And it does give you a warning. It said revert to original. And if you screwed that up, well, you can't really undo the undo. I mean, I can hit Control Z, but yeah, there we go. All right, I hit Control Z a couple of times and I got back to where we were. So that gives me a chance to undo things a step by step back. But I'm going to skip worrying about the blush and just keep on moving down. So contour. If you're familiar with makeup and contouring, this is where they're kind of trying to contour the cheeks, jawline, the shape of the nose. So we're going to bring this, again, way up. And then there's a feather. So if the edges are too harsh, like there, you can see the contouring is a bit harsh. Like if you look right over here. But if I feather that off, it gets a bit, wrong feather. If I feather the contouring off, it gets a bit softer on the edge over here. So I'm going to bring that back down and turn these off. Highlights, you can bring in some highlights if you want to, and you can see that on her face, particularly right in here. We're getting a few highlights. And bring the feather up a little bit. Eyeliner, we can bring that way up. And glow. Now, the glow is on the eyeliner. That is not what I typically think of when I see the word glow. Glow to me is like a softening effect of pretty much the entire photo. So this is going to be used in a cosmetic term, not necessarily if you're used to working on photos that has a glow feature. You can kind of change the eyeliner a little bit. You can change the glow. And forgive me, I'm not that good with this, so I'm not really seeing a tremendous effect here. There's also an eyebrow enhancement. Now, I played with this earlier, and I did some really strange and terrible things to the poor lady. So I bring that up. And it did take a little bit. What you're seeing happen here is, this is again is in Luminar Neo. These enhancements are really just taking the hair and making it darker. For someone like her with dark hair, that works very nicely. If I bring this all the way down, you can see that it really changed and it's lightened up there. If you have someone with red hair or blonde hair and their eyebrows are the same kind of color, and it darkens it up, it changes the character of their face. So I would be careful with the eyebrow enhancement. All right, so we'll come down to lips. We can do our saturation and bring that up. We can change our tone a little bit, and you can see how I'm going to slide back and forth. You can kind of see how, particularly on her lower lip, how the colors are changing. And then we can also darken her lips like that. Now, body skin, we can do body skin smoothing. We don't have a lot of body skin. All we have are parts of her shoulders, really. So I'm not going to go into that so much. But I think for a retouching, particularly for face retouching, there are a lot of wonderful tools here. I like it, and it gives you some great possibilities. Now, if we come over here to, we're on this one for retouch. We come down to the next one. This is reshape. This is where you can go crazy wild and do things that perhaps you may not want to do. So her eyebrow arches, her eyes. Let's start with her face slimming. I'm going to bring this all the way over. It seems to take a moment to think, and then suddenly I've shrunk her head. It's like I put her in a vise. If you're going to do face slimming, that's not a bad thing. I would say shoot for around under 10% of the width of her face. So you can't take someone who's very heavy set, bring this all the way over here, and suddenly they look like they've been working out in the gym all their life. It doesn't work that way. I would say do maybe about 10%. And all that really does is make someone look just a little bit better, but you can't quite put your finger on why. And I'd say don't use too much of this. That's my advice anyways. All right, you can change the shape of the eyes. So we'll bring this over. And now she looks like a doll or a cartoon. So we've really enlarged her eyes. Again, this is a kind of a feature that is in Luminar Neo. The eyebrows for arch, position, and distance. This is where I really made mistakes before. So if I pull this all the way up, yeah, you can see how quickly that happened. And then I bring them back down, hopefully. There it is. All right, so this is what I was saying about it takes a little bit of time once in a while to bring things down. Again, I'm on an iMac M1 chip with 16 gigs of RAM. That's a few years old. If you're on a newer computer, faster graphics and stuff, you may not have that same delay. If you're on an older computer, expect to wait longer than I'm waiting. So the eyebrow position. I'm kind of waiting to see what happens. I don't really see anything happening yet. Oh, there we go. So now I can see the eyebrow position. I think what happens is it might take a moment for it to get the idea of where it's going to be, and then you can kind of slide things more smoothly. So you can adjust your eyebrows that way. And eyebrow distance. So I'm going to give this a moment, and then I'm going to start sliding back and forth. Okay, there we go. So you can see this really changed the gap between her eyebrows. And then this one ought to bring the gap much smaller like that. So it's taking a little bit of time to do that. Now we can change the shape of her nose. There are times you want to do these things. For the most part, most portraits, I don't do these things because quite honestly, I don't want to change the person that I photographed. I want to make them look better as to who they are. I don't want to change who they are. But it's nice to have these tools because your purpose may not be the same as mine. Maybe you're doing this for an advertisement or something commercial, or the model is a stand-in and then you shape the result that you want for maybe a product that you're selling. So that's something to keep in mind. And so we've got a nose bridge shape, nose to tip shape. And you can see that really extends her nose there, or in this case, it kind of pulls it back a little bit. So I'm just going to undo those. The mouth, her lip position and upper lip and lower lip, we're not going to see too much simply because her lips aren't separated. So I'm going to go ahead with trying to see what happens with lip position. And I suspect that's going to change the distance or gap between her lips and her nose. I'm sure there's a medical term for what that is. Yeah, you can see how that changes. So as I move this around, you can watch and then it changes. So let's go back to default. The body and shape changing, I don't have a full body photo here, so we're not going to go over that. Like I said, you can get really crazy with some of these things. So if I click this on female, I remember that there were some tools in some of these side settings where I could not use them, and keep that in mind. So let's go down here. And this is where we get into our light controls. So we can go with our scene settings and position the light. So let's put a light source out here. You can put in more than one light source and show on a canvas. And then there's the other one. So if we want to get rid of one of these, how do we do that? There we go. Let's remove that. So now all you see is a white dot. You need to add an amount of light. And you can see how bright that becomes. So you can choose that brightness over here for the overall photo. It's not changing the brightness of this light source setting. So that's the scene setting. And the same thing with the smoothness, you can change that. So let's go ahead. We're going to remove this, or at least hide it for right now. As we change these scene settings, without that light source, you're not getting anything. So I'll put that back down. And then we also have light contrast here. So we're not seeing anything until we add this source. So I'm going to bring up the amount. And then as I move this around, you can see how it changes on her face and kind of allows you to relight your subject. So you can move that in a number of places. You can, really drag it around. And you can see like the shadow over here, where that's kind of where you may want to go ahead and change some of the settings. Maybe you want to add more smoothness. You want to keep your contrast down, because if we bring this contrast up, that's going to give you kind of this look, which is not necessarily anything wrong with that type of look. It's just not what I'm looking for with this portrait. And I think the brightness is a bit much for me on, wrong one. It's the amount over here for this one. So I want to bring that down. It doesn't take much. You can change the hue and saturation. So let's say that we wanted to put a yellow light. We bring that up. Now let's bring up the amount. As you see the color of this dot change, that is the color that you're getting. So if I want to put a red light on her, or a pinkish light, there's red over here. You can change the lighting that you want to put on somebody. And that's not a bad idea either. If you're ever doing work with gels, or you're taking something in an area with maybe some neon lights and you want to kind of shape that around, this is a great way to handle that. And you can see the depth slider over here. You can change how that's affecting how deep the light is casting on her. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and remove that. We've hidden this one. We could show it again. And then let's just hide that for now. Portrait bokeh, it's kind of hard to tell on a flat background like this. Now, the nice thing about the bokeh in this tool is it gives you some control of your background. You can change the brightness. So if we can do that a little bit, but it's not detecting the background here because of the fact that I'm just shooting on a white solid background. And you can get a little highlight glow. You can change the temperature. But again, this is difficult to show without having a, let's say a texture background. Let's say maybe you shot this out in a field someplace, or you had a building behind you. I think you'd probably see more there. So we'll probably have to look at that maybe in another video, but I wanted to show you what the tools were. Over here with LUTs, you can choose some of the LUTs that are brought along with this. I kind of like the Long Beach and the Manhattan looks. Again, you can choose the amount. You can load your own LUTs. I've got more LUTs than I know what to do with. And get more LUTs will take you to a store. Film grain, I got to be honest, I've never been a fan of adding film grain to a portrait taken with a modern camera, a digital camera. But there is a reason for it. Again, sometimes people are trying to replicate old film. They're trying to replicate something from the past. And this will do that. So if you want to start adding grain, you can see the grain over there. You can change the size. You can reduce the grain. You can enlarge the grain and how rough it is. Personally, I'm not a fan of it, but that's okay. So if you want to do a vignette, I'd like to just put that right on her nose. And then let's bring this down a little bit. Probably a little too much right there. And then you can change the roundness. You can change the feather. So you could have a really hard vignette if you wanted to, or you can have a nice soft vignette. And then you can bring up a little bit of inner light, which I think is a wonderful thing. You can see how that just kind of brings some light inside the vignette, but leaving the edges of the vignette dark. So that's one of my favorite things. And then we could do a high key. There are times I really like having a high key portrait, and I think this is doing a nice job of it. Let's say if we went right about there, and then you can do with your standard and dynamic high key. So standard is going to be pretty much level all the way around. Dynamic is going to be looking at your portrait subject, which again, with this particular photo, I don't know how well that's typically going to work. I'd say it is working because her skin is not really getting blown out as I did with the standard high key. So play around with those. I would say that I'd probably start with a dynamic high key first. And then you can look at your blacks. So you can see we've lost her hair detail and we've kind of brought everything in. And we can open things up a bit. All right, I talked about a glow. So this is what I'm looking for with a glow. That's a bit too much glow. But there it is. So contrast, you can put this in or out. You can do saturation. I don't like saturation on portraits because it is usually affecting too many colors at once, not the way that I want to affect them. All right, so let's take a quick look from where we started here, and we're here now. I probably wouldn't do too much high key on her. I actually like her natural skin tone better. So I want to bring that high key down. But I think a lot of the tools that you need for portraits are here. We can get rid of dust spots with the erase tool. We can add a glow, which for portraits, I am a big fan of glow. I mean, you can overdo the glow, but this one doesn't seem to oversell it. You can get more contrast in there. Now, I've seen some very soft glows. This one, I think, is doing a nice job of just enhancing the portrait and giving you a result that you didn't have before that just kind of sells it as a beauty shot, perhaps, more than the standard one. Now, clearly, I've left her eyebrows messed up, but this is where we started, and this is where we are now. So that is a quick look of some of the things. Now, also I want to point out these little white dots. Those are tools where you've made changes. So you notice we did click on up here with a crop. We didn't change a crop, so we don't have anything to undo on that. We can still go back and make adjustments here. Then right over here, this is going to be info, and it's going to give you info about your photograph. So we don't need that right now. And then this one is your undo. Again, be careful with that if you undo too much, and then trying to get back to where you were can be a real pain. All right, overall, this is a good tool for portrait photographers. I want to make certain that is what it's marketed as for portraits. It is sold to portrait photographers. This is not your all-in-one tool. We're not really dealing with cutting people out, doing composites. There's no sky replacement. There's nothing of that sort. This is specifically for portrait retouching. And with that, I think it does a really good job. I'm very pleased with it. I'm happy with the results. I'd say that, let's say these stray hairs over here, sometimes you wonder, I've tried other tools that will go ahead and automatically detect those and clip them off. They usually don't do a very good job, in my opinion. They kind of make the edge of the hair look awful. So it takes a little bit of work to go through and do this stuff yourself. But you know what? I think the result that you get, if you get rid of these stray hairs by yourself, one at a time, gives you a better result. But the rest of the stuff, this can really speed up and enhance your portrait retouching cycle. So if you're interested in this, I hope this has helped you get an idea of what it does, what it doesn't do. And if you're wanting to check it out, just go to williambeam.com/Aperty. I will have a link to that in the description below, as well as my coupon code, if that helps you out at all. So thanks very much. If you have any questions, let me know in the comments. See you in the next video.